Well, let's talk sustainable diets, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephan Peters, working at the Dutch Dairy Association. And before I worked at the Dutch Dairy Association, quite relevant for this story, is I've also been working at the Dutch Nutrition Center. And there we made the Dutch food-based dietary guidelines. And based on some applications that we have developed there, I'm going to tell you something hopefully interesting. But I'm going to talk about sustainable diets. And maybe it's best to start to ask you, what do you think is a sustainable diet? And of course, I have only got 9 minutes, so probably you would answer, okay, sustainable diet is a diet with as low as possible environmental footprint, right? With a low CO2 emission. Or maybe I think the majority of you would answer the question with it is a plant-based diet. And that's quite a logical direction because animal-based products have got a relatively high environmental footprint per kilogram, and plant-based have got a relatively low environmental footprint per kilogram. So if you would change animal-based products for plant-based products, then the environmental footprint of your diet will decrease. Very logical. But of course, there are always buts. Animal-based products also provide for a lot of essential nutrients in our diet. And if you look at the average European diet, then animal products provide for more than 50% of the following essential nutrients: vitamin A, vitamin B2, B12, zinc, calcium, iron, iodine, selenium. So if you're going to decrease animal-based products, you have to compensate for all those nutrients that you, well, have lost. So that should be done in a healthy way. So that means that the very simple definition of a low environmental footprint diet is a sustainable diet, or diet plant-based or plant-only is a sustainable diet is too simple. That is why I want to introduce to you, hopefully not introducing, and maybe you are already familiar with the definition or the Food and Agricultural Organization of a sustainable diet. And that has been extracted of the definition of a sustainable food system. And the sustainable food system tells that if you're going to translate that into a sustainable diet, then you do not only have to take into account the environmental footprint of the diet, but also that the diet is healthy. And with healthy mean that the diet provides you with sufficient amount of essential nutrients. The diet should be affordable. And of course, the diet should be acceptable by consumers. If we are going to provide a very strange diet to consumers, which is very environmental friendly, consumers are not going to eat it. Take this definition into account. A sustainable diet is the optimal balanced diet which takes into account health, ecology, culture, and economy, affordability. So you might have heard already of some food-based diet guidelines recently published. Eat Lancet, you might have heard of it. The Eat Lancet diet claims to be the diet that is healthy and that can be produced within the planetary boundaries for all human beings living on Earth. But the Eat Lancet diet has been calculated is not providing sufficient essential nutrients. So that means it is an unhealthy diet, and actually, based on the FAO definition of a sustainable diet, a diet that cannot provide all essential nutrients is not a sustainable diet. So we have to make some corrections there. Based on the Eat Lancet, the Danish food-based dietary guidelines have been constructed, and they 1 or 2 weeks ago they made a correction because they thought or they discovered our diet is not nutrient adequate. And what they do, I think it has been published 1.5 weeks ago, they said, okay, we have to add some more milk in our food-based diet guidelines and 1 egg per week more to make it nutrient adequate. Well, all those food-based diet guidelines are food-based diet guidelines that point you towards a diet that they want you to go to in future, right? But, well, of course we want to know, are these diets achievable starting with the current diet? And that is something that we have done. I think that is quite, it is oversimple, but it's unique. What we have done is the following. We started with the average Dutch diet. We put it in a model. That model is called Optimeal. And that model can take into account all those 4 dimensions of that FAO definition: health, environment, culture, and economic, so affordability. And what we did is the following. I'm not going to tell a lot about the methodology, but what it can do, for example, I've got a Dutch diet with meat. If I'm going to decrease my meat intake in my diet, I have to compensate for all those essential nutrients I'm losing. The program calculates an alternative diet, increasing other foods that can compensate for those nutrients I'm losing. It can also calculate the CO2 footprint of that diet and the price of the supermarket basket of those diets. Well, we did that for 12 food groups. I'm not going to tell the results of all those 12 food groups, but let's start with meat. If I'm going to decrease my meat intake in my diet, compensate for it in a healthy way, so a nutrient adequate way, then still my CO2 footprint will decrease. Luckily, because that is what we have expected based on less animal, more plant-based. And it can decrease by 25% for the Dutch situation. I think for most European countries it might be similar. The supermarket, the food basket price will increase a bit by 10-15%. Well, we did the same for some plant-based products, actually for all plant-based products, like fruits and vegetables. And if you'll increase, right, increasing plant-based products, decreasing CO2 emission, that is what you expect. If you increase fruit and vegetables locally produced in our country, so in Europe, open air, then the CO2 footprint will decrease, but the price will increase a bit. However, if you're going to consume like modern vegan people with very exotic fruit and vegetables, then the CO2 footprint will go up and the price will go up also. And then what is the most sustainable food group according to this FAO definition and our model? It's not dairy, what you would expect because I'm of the Dutch dairy industry. It's our whole grain products. So whole grain bread, pasta, etc. If we increase whole grain products in the model, we see a decrease in the CO2 footprint and a decrease in the supermarket basket. So whole grain products are the perfect products if you want to change your diet towards a more sustainable diet. And then finally, dairy products. What we found out during our study is that when we would decrease dairy products, and in the Netherlands we consume a lot of dairy products, 350 grams a day on average. If we decrease that towards zero, then we see something strange happening in the model because dairy is a very nutrient-dense product group. Among the food-based products, it has a relatively low CO2 footprint when compared to nutrients. So when I'm decreasing dairy until zero, then I see a lot of compensation in other products. For example, I have to eat daily, according to the model, 500 grams of leafy vegetable to compensate for calcium. I have to consume more fish, I have to consume more nuts and seeds. And the funny thing is, the increase of the consumption of the other products, that increase has got exactly the same environmental footprint as the dairy, the original dairy was. So that means that decreasing dairy to have a more environmental friendly diet did not lead to a decreased CO2 footprint, but an increase of 33%, one third of my supermarket basket. So this is a bit what you can expect when changing the current diet. It is sometimes confirming less animal, more plant-based, sometimes challenging it. So there's a lot beyond the details. And now finally let's go to that definition. And I got my notes, not only to raise, but to get my good definition. Because if we are going to define a sustainable diet, I started with the fact it's not just plant-based, taking into consideration that plant-based products have got a lower environmental footprint. No, because only plant-based cannot provide with all essential nutrients. A sustainable diet, taking into account also affordability and acceptability, is not plant-based. Maybe we should add a nuance. It is a plant-based, animal-optimized diet. And then, of course, I'm from the Dutch dairy industry, from the Dairy Society. Among the animal-based products, the dairy products, as I said, have got a kind of lower CO2 footprint compared with the nutrients that they provide. So when I'm going to optimize a more and more plant-based diet with animal-based products, well, dairy products are the first to come. So dairy is ready for the future, and I know that nobody wants to, well, consume a diet or a day without cheese. Thank you.
Thank you.